Right. Well, a warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to get started. I'm sure there'll be a few more people joining as we go along. But my name is John Somerville. I'm Head of Financial Services here at the London Institute of Banking and Finance. We're here today to look at the very important issue, actually, of how can I professionalize my career in motor retail finance? As of recently, a huge amount of focus in this area, certainly from our regulator, as well as the industry itself, huge amount of focus on finance. So what we're going to be talking about today, we'll be hearing from professionals, both motor finance and retail sectors, that have passed our qualification in automotive finance. And the panelists are going to be covering the benefits of taking professional qualifications, such as CertAutoFS, for individuals and businesses, ways employers have supported and assisted with professional development, and why professional development is so important in the current and future motor finance retail market. So I'm going to, before I introduce our speakers, I just wanted to let you know that the webinar is going to run for about an hour. So we should be able to get you off and back to your busy lives from about 1 o'clock onwards. You'll notice there's a lot of you have already seen the chat box. If you would like to ask a question, please enter it into the chat box. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions that you'll have for our panelists. Enter it into the chat box at the bottom. And what we'll do is we'll have a little Q&A at the end of this session. So the way the session is going to run, I'm going to hand over to our panelists. They're going to be doing some presentations, and at the very end, as I say, a Q&A session finally. So really, time for me to introduce our guests and speakers. First of all, Adrian Daly, who is Director of Motor Finance and Strategy, Finance and Leasing Association, the FLA themselves. So Adrian is the director, as I've already mentioned. And before joining the FLA, Adrian spent 26 years in the civil service and in Whitehall and diplomatic roles, specialising in a number of areas, including financial services, consumer protection, rural policy, competition, and the European Union. Among other things, he was a UK negotiator in the EU institutions and private secretary to 2 cabinet ministers. His last role was at the Financial Ombudsman Service, where he was head of policy. Wow, what a list, Adrian, my word. And looking dashing on the back of all of that as well, I may add. So how are you this today? Yes, absolutely. How are you today?
Very good. I should have gone to Specsavers, John, I think, on that one. But it's a pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to see so many people on the call, and even from different parts of the world. And certainly speaking from a cold and damp East Anglian morning here, knowing that there are colleagues here in Dhaka and Shanghai, where the weather is much warmer and nicer. You know, wouldn't it be nice to be with you? But it's good to be here virtually.
Fantastic. Great to hear from you, Adrian. And obviously we're going to hear some great deal of information from you later. So I was going to say that's a huge number of government offices that you worked for in the past, isn't it? You know, so I take it that was just a very, very, not that you're not busy now, but a very busy time of your career going through all of those, especially governmental work.
Well, it certainly was, and it's been a privilege to be a civil servant for a long time. But but moving over to the FLA to represent the motor finance industry, which is worth £75 billion a year, benefiting UK consumers and enabling the UK's customers to move around and go to work and go to school. You know, it's a real privilege to be able to have a position of responsibility in such an important industry.
It's incredible to think that, actually. It's a good point. You know, we actually keep the country moving. That's the really fantastic thing about what you guys do. It's just amazing. So thank you for that, Adrian. We'll come to you very shortly for your presentation. Moving on to our next speaker this afternoon will be Derek Knight. He is our sales and process manager at Porsche Retail Group. So Derek, sorry, I've got myself. Sorry, Derek is the head, is the group F&I and sales process manager for Porsche Retail Group, the manufacturer-owned retail arm in the UK. Derek has been with PRG for more than 10 years, and in his current role for nearly 2.5 years. Derek's career has mainly been in motor retail and includes experience with only German brands. And his first outing with Porsche during the dot-com boom and millennium bug scare. Well, gosh, I dare say there's quite a few people that don't even remember that on this particular call, but unfortunately I do. But having been around at that, I remember that, you know, planes were going to fall out the sky and everything at that point. That was quite a time of it. His current role touches many facets of the business, including full responsibility for F&I process and performance, business partners, compliance, mentoring of salespeople and managers. A very warm welcome to you this afternoon, Derek.
Thank you very much. Really happy to be here.
Amazing background there, and interesting that your experience has remained with German brands, and I'm sure obviously you know, Brexit is something you know, working with continental Europe. Have you seen much difference in the last 12 months since things have changed a little bit?
We haven't really noticed too much. I mean, there was a small price increase, but luckily most of a Porsche is made in Germany. So there's an element where some of the parts of the cars are made elsewhere and they travel through that part. So some more electrified cars have increased in price because of Brexit. But in terms of demand, in terms of regulatory things, we've seen very little change.
Amazing. There you go. So great news from your point of view, and obviously a quality product nonetheless as well. So fantastic. Great to hear from you, Derek. We'll be hearing from you again shortly this afternoon. And then finally, last introduction today is Lee Rowlatt, who is Territory Manager at Northridge Finance. So Lee started his career by completing an apprenticeship in electronic engineering, and from there progressed to Regional Sales Manager. He has held sales and account management positions in a few different companies in and around the motor industry before joining Northridge 4 years ago as Territory Manager. And I remember actually we had a little warm-up conversation, didn't we, Lee? And you said, "Oh, I'm the new boy here," but 4 years at Northridge is hardly the new boy, really, is it? You've been there for a reasonable amount of time now. How are you this afternoon, anyway?
Very well, thanks, John. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I don't think I could dine out on that for much longer. And I'm closing in on my 40th birthday. So yeah, as much as I might be 18 at heart, I think got to come to terms with that. But, yeah.
Lee, you hang on to it for as long as you can. That's all I can say on the matter. I would. There's plenty of nods. I can see Derek nodding away, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. It is, yeah, you stick there. 40 sounds good to me. If only I could have my time over again. I'm, as I say, just reminiscing on the Millennium Bug that you that Derek's got in his bio. That was quite something, I must admit. So back in the day, if you've got a question about the Millennium Bug, stick it in the chat. I'm sure one of us could answer. But, anyway, a warm welcome to you and all of our guests and everybody who's attending this afternoon. So great to see you all. So without further ado, and before I start, I'm going to set a little poll question before I hand over to Adrian. So Liam, could you bring up the first poll question for us? And it's a very simple one. It won't take a minute to answer. So just about to pop up on our screens here. So there you go. So do you complete the annual SAF expert test? A very simple yes or no. So it'd be interesting to see from everybody here how many people are actually using the SAF expert test. So we'll just give that a few seconds to run through. Luckily, the Millennium Bug is not affecting our systems by the looks of it. So everybody's able to click in and answer that question. So we've got 25 answered so far. And interestingly, it's about a quarter of everybody on this call, between a quarter and a third actually looking at this, that currently aren't using the SAF expert test, and 2/3 are using the SAF expert test. So that's interesting to see to begin with. So, you know, interesting really, Adrian, as I hand over to you, you know, it'd be interesting to find out why those that aren't using it, I guess, wouldn't be using it. And obviously, you know, especially as we're talking about qualifications today and professionalize our careers, how we can get more people to sort of take up that kind of educational part of what we do in the finance industry. So without further ado, Adrian, I'll hand over to you, and obviously we'll let you take it from there. Sorry, actually, before I do that, I just remembered I'm terrible with poll results. Could you share the results, please, Liam? There you go. All right, there it is. So that, hopefully you can all see there. So 31% have said no, 69% have said yes. Okay, so anyway, without further ado, Adrian, over to you.
Okay, thank you, John, and hello, everybody. Good to see and hear you. So the backdrop of that question is that, of course, our sector is a very large one. We have nearly 7 million customers in the UK, and partly because of how important the sector therefore is in many people's lives. It's a regulated sector, so it's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, and of course they've taken a very close look at how the sector has performed over the years, and it did a motor finance review 3 or 4 years ago, and they did in fact look very closely at how firms, including especially dealerships, how dealerships performed in terms of their customers, comparing whether they invested in training or not to a significant degree, and they noticed that some retailers performed less well than others, and they put in a quote there that and I quote here: "This may in part reflect the respective investments made in staff training by the different industry sectors." So they clearly found a correlation there between the amount a company invests in training and how well it treats its customers and its profitability. That's highly intuitive. I think that's what you'd expect. But the point is, the regulator has noticed that, and when the FCA visits or looks at particular regulated firms, including lenders, brokers, dealers, one of the things they'll look for is, well, how seriously does this company take training and professional development? As that's a bit of an indicator. In fact, it's more than just a bit of an indicator. It's a very strong indicator of the health of that business. So again, no real surprises there. Indeed, since the FCA published those findings, they've taken the concept somewhat further. And many of you who are on the front end of regulation will know that the FCA is currently consulting on introducing a new consumer duty, as it's calling it. And this will apply to every regulated firm in the country, whatever part of financial services you're in. And this is very, very profound, because this will be a new consumer duty that sits right on top of everything. And it describes at a very high level the standards that the regulator expects. And it's pretty down to earth, actually. It's not very detailed, but it sets out in plain language the basic principles that it expects, a financial services firm in the 21st century to be meeting. So essentially what the FCA is asking us all to do, whatever company we're in, is to put ourselves in our customer's shoes, essentially. Think about things from the customer's point of view when they're dealing with us. And a particular test they put out there as part of the customer duty is a test. If you ask yourself, and I quote them again, would I recommend my firm's products and services to my friends and family? And that's a really punchy question. If we instinctively we respond without hesitation, yes, of course, then that's probably means you're in a good place. It probably means you're investing very heavily in training and professional development and staff engagement. But if there's a hesitation in answering that question and thinking, well, would I? Then that probably indicates you've got some work to do. But anyway, certainly the FCA will be acutely aware, as we all are, of the science behind this. There is so much evidence going back many, many decades in every country in the world, in every industry sector, about the link between this type of investment and company performance. So it is incontrovertible in terms of the science that firms that invest more or invest more in professionalism or take professionalism more seriously, those that have good staff engagement policies across the organization, and in particular firms that invest in development of their people. The data's undeniable. Those firms have better business performance. They are more profitable. They have happier customers, and of course, the one thing leads to the other. Happier customer means you're more profitable, and vice versa. So there is an undeniable link in any part of the world, in any industry, between those three things. Investment in personal development, staff engagement, and professionalism. So the upshot then is, in this context, when you look at a motor finance context, whether you're in a dealership or a brokerage or a financial service or a motor finance firm, think about that question that the FCA is asking us to ask ourselves about would I recommend my firm's products and services to my friends and family. And I often call that the mum test. Would I be happy if my mum, if she was still alive, would I be happy sending her to this particular dealership to buy a car? Now, I mean, to put it in practical terms, if there's two dealerships to think about, one dealership has a very traditional model, doesn't invest much in qualifications, doesn't really know what they are, don't engage their staff particularly well, and has a very low training budget. Or there's a dealership that they're competing against, and that dealership, everyone that meets a customer has taken their SAF test. The business manager has CertAutoFS, and maybe a couple of the sales executives who are career minded and fancy being a business manager, they've also taken CertAutoFS. And generally speaking, you're seeing a good culture in that dealership where the dealer principal is on good terms with his staff or her staff. Where would I want my mum to go? Where do I think my mum would be treated well? It's obvious, and also if you ask the people in those firms this very same question, would I recommend my dealership's products and services to my friends and family? It's absolutely obvious. It's the second dealership you get the right answer out of, not the first one. So it's all those reasons, but put them together. Investing in that pathway where you're coming into the industry fresh, and maybe you're coming in on an apprenticeship, like you did, Lee, and there's now a motor finance apprenticeship, for example. You're coming in on an apprenticeship. You're then, as part of that, you're taking the SAF test. You can see a career path ahead of you, up to business manager and dealer principal and beyond. So you take CertAutoFS to put you on that pathway. I mean, that's what it really looks like in many ways. I think that's the sort of world that that the regulator definitely knows what good looks like. So I think there is a challenge to us when the new consumer duty comes into force next year. Do expect questions from the regulator about how is your company on these measures, and what you're doing on training and development and qualifications. Absolutely at the heart of it, from your front line up to the boardroom. So absolutely. So that's how we see it from the FLA, looking at the landscape. I think there's a very pretty strong drive there towards the SAF process and CertAutoFS as part of that. So back to you, John.
Oh, amazing, Adrian. Thank you. I picked up in such a succinct presentation as well. There's so much to sort of take out of that, and just a couple of things for me. The mum test is something that I often think myself, and with everything that I do, not just from a motor finance perspective, but huge walks of life. What differentiates the culture, that's the good culture, from the not so good culture, the culture that says, actually, yes, I'm happy to leave my mum here to get the right kind of service. The banks have been through this a hell of a lot. If you look at all the mis-selling scandals they've had in the past and where they are today, and financial services, I think, and this is my background for everybody on the call. I'm regulated financial services background, and I often think, okay, well, they've had education enforced on them in that they have a license to trade qualification now for mortgage advisors and financial advisors. So interestingly, what I find particularly interesting is that those people, that even though it's enforced on them to have that a level 4 or level 3 qualification, the vast majority of them then go on to take the extra qualification that takes them up a step. So an awful lot of financial advisors now are looking for chartered status at level 6. They don't have to do it. It's not a requirement of the job, but they're doing it because actually that educational standard breeds a huge amount of good culture, good respect for customers, top customer service, and that sort of thing. So that I thought was quite interesting. But I was going to mention to you, Adrian, actually, just a quick question on, because we focused on dealerships there, obviously, but we find an awful lot of people taking this in finance teams and across the industry as well, and the professionalism stems from that as well, doesn't it? It's very important that it's the whole of the industry that really is taking this qualification, and it's certainly interesting to bring them into that conversation as well.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the way CertAutoFS has been designed is to cover all people working in motor finance, whether you're in a dealership or a brokerage or a finance company. And I think, and to be completely honest with you, one of the drivers of that was to encourage people coming into the sector to look at their career prospects across all of those sorts of firms. And we've got people here today who have worked both in finance companies and in retail. And that's completely healthy. They're transferable skill sets, and I think by having a single level 3 qualification, which is very much the level the FCA is looking for, is level 3. Having a single qualification, that means that you've got a cadre of professionals here that understand the network as a whole. They understand where a finance company is coming from, what are the legal constraints, regulatory constraints that a finance company must operate under, which means it explains why the products are designed the way they are. And then when you're in retail, as a business manager or a sales executive, you're aware of that, and you can explain how it works to a customer and why, and vice versa. People doing a job like Lee and Derek do, that understanding of the whole network and how it all works, how it all fits together, makes for a seriously strong professional that's capable of working in a number of different environments.
Yeah, and just to put it into context for everybody, for all our guests here today, that level 3 qualification puts you on a par with a mortgage advisor. So a mortgage advisor takes a level 3 qualification. This is a level 3 qualification. You should take, this is how highly rated this industry is. We have a qualification in place that puts you on the same standing as somebody who works in mortgage advice. Very highly regulated part of the business. And if you buy a house, that's your number one biggest purchase you'll ever make, and then the car is the second biggest purchase you'll ever make, and there's finance arrangements for both of those. Each of them have their own complexities, and it's important to note that that we recognize that as a equally difficult and complex job to take. So I think that's really quite interesting. So thanks for that, Adrian. Before I hand over to Derek, I just want to bring up the next poll question. So behind the scenes, if you hear me saying, Liam, could you bring the poll questions up? Liam's running the show behind the scenes, so from LIBF. So Liam, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the next question, fantastic. So just out of interest, before we go on to the guys who are actually taking the qualification, and we'll tell you all about it, just really little thoughts. Have you thought about taking a qualification to further your career, and certainly, focused on financial services? So let's see how many of you have done or are thinking about doing that and taking an extra qualification. It's a resounding positive at the moment, which is excellent stuff, and good to see, actually. Oh, amazing. I can see the numbers coming in. We'll just end the poll in just a few seconds, but yeah, so for those of you that are responding, there's a huge amount of positives here, so that's really good to see, very encouraging. Obviously feel free to share your thoughts if there's anything that particularly holds you back. So if there's some reason why you haven't decided you want to pursue a career, pursue an extra qualification, that is, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. If you want to pop them into the chat box, you can do it anonymously, actually, if you want to just send it directly to me, and I'll keep you anonymous. But we'd be very happy to have your thoughts as well. But I'm going to, if we can end the poll now then, Liam, and share the results. Interestingly, 85% of the people on this call have thought about taking an extra qualification, which is really very, very reassuring. And for the 15% that haven't, as I say, it's always interesting for us. It's not a case of just sort of resting on our laurels there. And we totally respect, everybody's point of view, but it'd be interesting to find out why that might be. However, there you go. I mean, that's really great news, really. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Derek now, who's going to really take you through why this is important to his motor group and why they take all of their people through our level 3 qualification. So over to you, Derek.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So hi everyone. Good afternoon, as it is now. So I'm going to take us back to really a few years ago. So my predecessor joined in 2016, 2015, and 2016. He got together business managers around the group, so there's 5 business managers, and we started to have regular meetings, and we started to improve and standardise some of our processes. And part of that became around compliance and our knowledge about actually the regulator and about what the process was and what the protections were for customers and our obligations. And through some of that, he came across SAF Advanced, and he proposed that to us as a way we could standardise our knowledge across all the groups. And the purpose of standardising knowledge is so that the message can become the same, and we could answer all our customers' questions and our sales executives' questions equally as good, really. That man was called Craig Brown. Craig passed first time his SAF Advanced with a distinction, apparently, although I've never seen the certificate, so I can't verify that. But he encouraged us all to do it. So it was a great process. It was 5 guys really sort of working hard. People hadn't been in school for a long time, restudying and taking up the challenge of SAF Advanced. And over a few months, it was fantastic. Revised together, did mock papers together, and one by one we went through and became CertAutoFS. What it really gave us as a group of individuals was real confidence. It goes constant knowledge, as I said, confidence in answering questions, but also guiding the business as to what should be the right outcome for our customers. So as a group, we became more aware of it, we became more lean in that way. Our thought process was more around what were the outcomes for customers rather than what was the outcome for the business. So it generated a really quite interesting swerve in the culture. All our executives are SAF expert. That's something we absolutely require from them within a very short period of starting with us. But SAF Advanced became something for business managers to do. Now, business managers became retail sales managers, very much in a hybrid role. And some of them come and some of them go, but each one that comes absolutely has to go through the CertAutoFS process and become qualified within the first year. But the beauty about it is they normally start with someone who is CertAutoFS, and I am, so we're able to actually take that person, that new starter, down the process of becoming part of our business, becoming part of the fabric, and actually upskilling them over a short space of time. It's a quite great thing to do, and actually because they do that, they also become a much firmer member of the team. So yeah, really, really good thing for us. As a group, I think we were the first to do that with all our business managers in the UK. So we were the first group to do that, and it really stood out. And every single person that passes, we celebrate. In fact, today, just before we started the webinar, one of my guys, been with one of our dealerships for about a year, has admittedly resat it twice, but today has passed. And it'll be a big celebration for him. We'll celebrate that within group. Everyone will know about that, and everyone will congratulate him because it is a big thing. Now, going on from that, we look at CertAutoFS as a big deal. So we are absolutely encouraging our execs to look at that. It's not something we mandate them, but it's something that we look at as a way that they can use for self-development. So within the Porsche world, there's lots of in-brand qualifications, if you like, such as Porsche the Experience, which we call PTE, master classes. We also have master sales execs who go through several levels of looking after customers. Now we deal with inquiries and test drives. We go through that training, and that's great, but it's all in brand. But actually, something outside of that, which they can carry with them, which is this qualification and carry with them for life, is to become CertAutoFS. And actually, within Porsche Retail Group, it's massively relevant because we look to them to look after the customer. We look to them to take them through the process almost all the way by themselves. And that will then include answering all the questions that the customer has about the regulated products, but actually doing it in the correct way and actually offering it in the correct way. So by upskilling them and acknowledging them, if that's a real phrase, that will empower them to be even better at their job and be empowering them to be more confident with their customers and look after them in the correct way, the way we want it to be. As I say, we don't mandate it, but as part of people who want to progress, people who identify themselves as someone who wants to get on in the retail group and in the industry, that is certainly an area we look to motivate them towards. And again, just to sort of like give a bit of back to them support, there's a number of people in our group now who are CertAutoFS, so I think there's 15 of us. We've got a couple of sales execs, and we all support that person who's looking to go through that process. So it's a big thing for us and something which comes up many times in meetings, interviews, in one-to-ones, everything else. Have we looked at this? Are you going to do it? Do you think you should do it? And they ask us if they think they should do it, and we absolutely encourage it. As I said, I think it really does massively improve the customer experience by giving them the knowledge to answer those questions. We're going to tie it up with a what we call a VAT and taxation course as well. So that very much marries up with our battery electric vehicles, companies, tax advantage of companies, benefit in kind, compelling reasons behind that, but also that knits in perfectly with why you should finance a car through a business. But you need to have the knowledge behind you to answer or present it properly with quality and answer all the questions properly. So yeah, our customer base, we feel when they walk in, they've got absolutely every confidence when they walk in here, they're going to get the information they need. I really think they're going to enjoy the experience they have at PRG. And what it's given to me really is advancement in my career. So although it was something which initially was brought in as a way of standardising our staff and our knowledge, for me, it progressed me massively. So whereas I was a business manager originally when I took this, by doing well with it and by being an advocate of CertAutoFS, it raised my career, my profile, and actually now, as Group F&I manager for the last 2.5 years, I feel really well equipped to help compliance on one side, help sales executives on another side, and help after sales, because all of that is intertwined with our business. And it's a massively important area, a more important area than ever within the industry, that we all act correctly, that we all are professional. We're not sales executives that are straight out of school. We're professional salespeople, and we should have that qualification to back it up. I don't believe there's any reason why people wouldn't look at that, as I said, unless they're absolutely are against it, but I can't believe that would be the case for anyone. And I think from a group point of view, or from an industry point of view, we should really be promoting this across all our advisors and all customer-facing people. Our sales executives have really got on board with it. We've had a couple go through it. There's many more signed up. And again, I talk them through that process myself and support them through that. And as a company, we pay for that cost. So actually, for developing our team and covering the cost of that, we also retain our staff really well, and we attract new staff, with that reputation behind us. So overall, CertAutoFS seemed like a big monster at the beginning. How do we get through this? But actually, by, as I said, embracing it, having many people go through it and be advocates of it, it's now hopefully become something which is more of a regular exam for people to sit, a regular qualification that you'll see with our people in Porsche Retail Group. Really good. Thank you.
That's amazing, Derek. Thank you so much for that presentation. And I've loads of notes, the same as I did for Adrian, actually, and lots to take out of this. A couple of things that I thought were really very, very interesting. One was career progression. And I linked this back to something you said earlier on in your presentation, which was you mentioned, obviously with people who take the qualification with you, some stay, some go. We experience turnover in every walk of life, regardless of whether it's motor finance or whether it's, motor dealership groups. It's the same in every walk of life, wherever you go. But what do you say to people who would maybe challenge you to say, well, look, what if I go to this cost, they might leave? Which is something that I commonly hear, and I'm sure you must hear this a lot as well. Is it something that you would say, actually, you can't afford not to train these people? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, as a group, we believe absolutely. If you don't develop your people, they will leave, and they'll find elsewhere. The motivation is not always, the cars, the money, the gym palaces we work in. It's often inside, it's internal, and people want to be developed and see progression. And if you don't do that, they'll find it elsewhere. So for us, bringing people through that process and upskilling them ordinarily makes people much more loyal. We do lose people, you're absolutely right, but it's it's never about the company that people leave. It's more about their own progression or next steps or personal circumstances. But by investing in people like this, and it is only a relatively small cost, we believe we add to our group, we add to our offering, and we retain our customers, and we attract better candidates when we need them.
That's a fantastic answer, and certainly the other, not really a question, just an observation, something you said, which I thought was absolutely tremendous, because where I've seen really good leadership in a lot of companies is in exactly what you've just described as being that conduit between all the different business areas and actually understanding them. I think that's a really relevant thing to sort of take on board for everybody here today. Really, you get an awful lot of respect from the business if you're talking to various other, especially in a complicated business, you're talking finance, and then you're talking to the sales, and you're talking to the manufacturing, you've got all these other things going on, that as the conduit that really understands it, you glue it all together. I think that's just an amazing thing. So obviously that's worked really well for you, Derek.
Oh, hugely, yeah. It's a brilliant role. The position I have now is fantastic for me in my own development, but as a business, I can pull people together. I can pull ideas together, and we can really make things happen a lot quicker and actually make them work a lot better, because the skills are in our group. But having someone like me who visits all our 5 centres, in touch with all the 7 businesses that we have, with parts and other operations, by saying that man over there knows how to do that, and this man knows this here, and actually from this guy here, we can put it all together and make a much better proposal for people, and as I said, deliver a much better experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Derek. And I know there's some great questions coming in. We've got a few at the end. So what we'll do is we'll wait until we've heard from Lee before we get to those. And obviously, if anybody's got any further questions, please keep them coming in the chat box. That'd be fantastic. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lee, who's going to talk us through the lender's perspective on the qualification and how that runs for them. Lee, over to you.
Thanks, John. So yeah, as you got from the introduction, I joined Northridge about 4.5 years ago now. And, although I'd come from regional account management experience, the motor finance and asset side of it was actually relatively new to me. Obviously, beside the experience of going and buying a car myself on finance, but very different, obviously, this side of the desk. So starting out, obviously, going through an induction process, you learn about the business and the people and the wider regulation of banking in general. But an important part of that was the SAF expert. It was a really good foundation knowledge for all the key aspects of the products that I'd be dealing with and the regulation around them. I found the material really easy to follow. The fact that it's broken down in small parts, you can dip in and out of it whilst you're, trying to lead a busy work and home life. I'm not saying that's the best way to do it, but that certainly worked for me. And the fact that it could also, the test itself could be taken online, it was really flexible, really easy to get through that initial qualification, if you like, and that initial milestone. And I mean, for all those reasons, the SAF expert is mandated across the teams within Northridge, actually, because I mean, we all play a role in delivering the products, be it if you're talking to the customers face to face, or if it's after sales support, or even in the back room. I think it's important to have that base knowledge, and that certainly if you're customer facing, I think it's an important professional standard to reach as a minimum, really, to ensure that we're representing the industry with the knowledge and integrity that we need. Also, the fact that it's renewed annually, I certainly use that as a good checkpoint, to refresh your learning, because every day's a school day. We're busy doing the stuff that's noisy around us. So I think it's important to check up that you've got your knowledge together, and things change. In the last couple of years have shown us that those things can change very rapidly. So the fact that it's refreshed is a really good checkpoint. I mean, moving from there, certainly within Northridge, it's another mandatory requirement that all territory managers and regional managers, and actually heads of staff in other departments, achieve the SAF Advanced as part of their core competencies. Now, again, this, as Derek said, this is funded by the business. It's a small cost, but also there's the study support that's there, and the support from the cohort of existing territory managers that have gone through the qualification. It gives you a lot of confidence that you can get through it. And also from an organisational point of view, it shows that, we're taking it seriously. It's an important part of our process, certainly when we're inducting new staff members. And this is demonstrated by that investment. The qualification itself, it goes into a lot more depth than the SAF expert. And again, it's all flexible, so you can fit it in around your life. And obviously, we've all got different circumstances. I'm married. I've got a very energetic 6-year-old daughter. And I've got a busy workload as well. So I personally found myself dipping into it in evenings, when there was, I could carve out a quiet moment to sit down and actually take the reading in. We've all got different circumstances, but the fact that it's that flexible allows you to fit it in with what you're doing. And I mean, I guess that raises quite a valuable point, because I personally saw the qualification as more of a benefit to me and to the business in a way. Once you've got that, it stays with you. You take it where you go. And not only did it help, certainly to begin with, build my knowledge, but it like Derek said as well, it builds your confidence. And I saw the role at Northridge as a great career opportunity. And the fact that the business was keen to invest in my development, meant that I was happy to invest my time as well back into that. And, it's no surprise that, one of the greatest assets to any business is the people, because it's the people that make up that organization. So surely that should be the first place that investment is made. And, as I said, that urge for reciprocity means that once you see the business, investing in you, it makes you want to invest back. It makes a more knowledgeable and effective team, and you're more committed as a member of that team. And that's certainly embedded in the culture within Northridge. And I'd argue there's almost certainly, as Adrian said, a direct line from that into business performance and bottom line. So anyway, going back to the studying side of it, again, the fact that the material was split up into small sections, like I said, it makes it easy to digest. And actually on the CertAutoFS, I found the checkpoint quizzes were particularly good, particularly useful to just making sure that all that reading was actually sinking in along the way. And also on that, there's loads of good things on there, but the study timetable was a great way to keep pace with what you were doing, to make sure that you were getting through the content at the right time leading up to your exams. And also the additional reading, which is, you could easily overlook that, but actually coming into the industry, having some good sources of information that you could dip into if you had a question that, you wanted to answer for yourself. Those additional reading signposts were a great source of that for me, and I actually found that really valuable as I was going through it. When I finished, it was a mixture of joy and relief, I think, on the actual day, but ultimately a sense of achievement, a sense of personal achievement, and being able to display the CertAutoFS letters, meant that there was an immediate, the intermediaries and customers and other stakeholders, anybody that you're interacting with really can immediately identify that, you've got to that professional standard, it gives them confidence that, you know, you're taking it seriously and you've got the knowledge to back that up. I mean, you mentioned mortgage advisor. I think that's a really great point, because, you know, you wouldn't have an unqualified electrician come in your house and do any work. You know, you wouldn't go to a mortgage advisor. You know, if you had those choices, one was qualified and one was not, we come to expect that. And being, like you said, you know, buying a vehicle is, not everybody gets the opportunity to buy their own home. So actually buying a vehicle might be the most expensive thing that they do. So, you know, why shouldn't that advice that they get come from a professional? You know, I think we take it for granted with other industries, and we've probably not got that quite yet. So personally for me, moving on from there, I'm not shy to say I'm ambitious. So one of the other colleagues at the time when I was actually just passed the test was studying the diploma in asset finance. And I know that's not necessarily part of this, but for me, and certainly from a lending perspective, if you're working in this side of it, if you like, it's a natural progression in the learning. You know, it takes it to another level. It is a level 5, so it does introduce coursework, which might not be everybody's cup of tea. And for me, certainly initially, it's quite daunting. You may not have done it before, or maybe been a while since you have, but there's loads of content, there's loads of support on the LIBF website. You've got the tutors, and also you've got, you know, the other people that you're doing it with that you can reach out to and kind of find your way through it if you're struggling. And getting through that, you know, give more confidence, you know, that further insight into, you know, how the business and why the business is set up in the way that it is, why the products are, how they perform, and a much deeper dive into the regulation and the regulator and the principles behind that, and obviously the benefits of it. And again, obviously being able to display those letters is an immediate indicator of what you've done, and gives you that credibility. You know, it lets people know that you've invested, you know, in your own development. So I mean, bringing that all together, I think, you know, in my opinion, the SAF expert or something equivalent to that, obviously, really should be a must. I think if you form in any part of a team that's even partially involved in advice, it costs nothing apart from some of your time to go through that process. It's very, very well laid out and easy to get through. And at Northridge, as part of our oversight, certainly with supporting an existing dealers, and when we onboard new dealers, we actively promote that. You know, and also in those regular conversations we have, because we view it as a really important part of what we do. It's, you know, it's an important professional standard, and it also gives confidence that the sales teams involved are, like Derek said, being able to deliver that information consistently and confidently to consumers. You know, I'd absolutely then recommend the SAF Advanced to anybody, you know, customer facing, regularly involved in those aspects. You know, it's online, it's flexible. You can take it in and around your day, and it gives you that confidence, knowledge, and credibility to those you're dealing with. I guess from a business perspective, you know, getting your teams through those recognized standards, it can only really add value. You know, it's not going to take anything away from the business. It's not a great cost. And it almost certainly will play a significant role in improving that performance in those teams. And look, we've all, I know, as you said at the top of the call, John, you know, I still think I'm probably a bit of a newbie, you know, 4 years in the industry, you know, listening to some of the experience out there. But in that short 4 years, you know, there's been a lot of bad press, you know, across the industry. And, you know, if we can professionalize ourselves and show that, you know, we all as an industry take that seriously, that'll help to, I think, bridge that gap back to a wider consumer confidence. That's me.
Fabulous. Thanks for that, Lee. Yeah, that was amazing. And thanks for, you know, and there's a couple of interesting things I've yeah, as you've noticed, I pick up quite a few things that you guys have been talking about. Confidence, I think, is the number one thing I heard from you. You know, that what it does is it brings, if you can talk confidently to all aspects, you know, whether it's colleagues or customers, it makes such a difference, you know, and it, you know, we often get very blinkered, I think, and we're, you know, I count myself amongst, you know, many where you focus on your own business, but then you forget about what's out there wider, and then you'll get left field questions around, well, what about this, what about that? And obviously getting a broader view does add confidence. But I did pick up on a very particularly busy personal life there, Lee, definitely. So my question for you really, especially with a very energetic 6-year-old, and yes, so I'm a recent new grandfather, so for the very first time. So at the moment she's 3 months old, and already it takes 4 adults to look after whenever she's staying. So I totally sympathise with your situation. Finding time to study then is always going to be a challenge, but so how do you work that into your routine? What sort of things do you try and do?
Well, like I said, really, I think the benefit of it being online and piecemeal, if you like, meant that if I'm being totally honest, it was probably when I was like in the bath, or sometime when I'm just on my own, there's no one else around, it's nice and quiet, and you get that piece and time to do it. But it just fit it in whenever you can, really. Obviously everybody's got different routines and schedules, and things can happen and disrupt them. But I found it easy to just dip in and out. The quizzes were a fantastic way to keep me on track personally. And then, of course, as everybody does, when it comes to the exam day, you cram it all in at the last minute before you get in.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's one thing that you said that I'll pick up on, which I'd recommend to anybody, which is the study planner. Definitely. I think the study planner, don't overlook it. It really does keep you on track. And the second thing is, when you do register, book your exam straight away, and obviously we'll come on to Q&As now, interestingly. And one particular question that came up already, and I'm just going to pick it up now, from Jackie, actually. So Jackie Curtis, she's asked a couple of questions, and I'm going to start with your first one, which is what is the time it takes to gain the level 3 CertAutoFS? So first and foremost, so if you're going to book the exam from when you register, now we tend to go with between 3 and 6 months, but obviously both Derek and Lee having been through the process, what would you say, guys? How long did it take you to complete the exam?
I've really, the CertAutoFS one was really, I just followed the timetable, to be honest. We just followed actually, you're quite right, setting that exam date gives you that goal to aim at, but you can certainly do it within the year. The diploma took a little bit longer because, of course, we had COVID in the middle, so it got deferred, but that was about 18 months to do that.
Definitely. Derek, what was your experience like?
Yeah, so I think, as I recall, I signed up in February and had it done by June.
Yeah.
And I think, like a lot of people, the main revisions came in the sort of second half of that, but we used a lot of test papers as well. I don't know if they're still available. Yeah. But the guys that that work for me now, they're basically doing it. Yeah, certainly within 6 months, they're taking their first test for sure.
Fantastic. There you go. So hopefully that gives you an indication there for everybody on the course, especially Jackie. Not worth rushing. At least 3, up to 6, possibly longer. But when you register, you have a year to take the exam for everybody to register. So it takes, you've got a year to start and finish your studies. So perfect. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to stick with Jackie's next question. This was directed squarely at Adrian, which is, do you think the new consumer duty goes far enough? Should it be mandatory to get CertAutoFS level 3 qualification within the motor finance industry?
Sure, that's a very good question, Jackie. I think that may be where this is going in the long run. If you look at how the FCA looks at financial services as a whole, all the other areas of financial services, most customer-facing roles in financial services, the FCA requires people to have a qualification. So think of mortgages, for example, that has already been mentioned. If you want to sell a mortgage or advise a customer on a mortgage, you have to have CMAP, which is LIBF's equivalent in the mortgage space, equivalent to CertAutoFS. You can't even start doing your job until you've got CMAP, which is functionally very, very, very similar to CertAutoFS. It's the equivalent. So it's level 3, A-level equivalent in sort of English terms. And that's mandated by the FCA. And there's lots of other examples across financial services in insurance, banking, investments, where you have similar requirements. The FCA will specify a particular level of qualification you need. So in fact, one of the reasons why CertAutoFS was introduced a few years back was essentially to anticipate where the FCA is likely to go in the long run. You know, we needed to have in motor finance an equivalent of CMAP in mortgages. So CertAutoFS was built. It exists. There is no other. There is no other qualification that's at that level. So but certainly level 3 is the level that the FCA expects as a minimum that people serving financial services customers to have in the different markets. And for some markets, it goes higher than that. So on complex pensions and investments, for example, it can require a higher level. So yes, it's not a requirement now, Jackie, to get CertAutoFS, but I think one should plan on the basis that that's going to happen eventually. I would think that is the likely direction of travel, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting, really. If you look at the standard of learning for everybody, and certainly Jackie, wherever you look, the standard of learning is at that level 3. That's the important thing. What we've done is brought it together, really, that in one qualification. But the standards of FCA expect is at that level. From what I've seen, it certainly helps. Got a very quick, I can give a quick answer to this one question actually from Graham. Does the motor finance apprenticeship fall within the government scheme and its levy? Yes, it does. It's quite simple. So I thought I'd move that on because we've got another couple of questions to get to. Graham, best place to look, if you go on to the Institute for Apprenticeships website, so effectively the IFA as it happens to be, but the Institute for Apprenticeships website, type in motor finance and the apprenticeship scheme comes up under there, if I remember rightly, Adrian. I think that's where it sits. So so go and have a look there and give you all the details you need. So perfect. Moving on, I've had an interesting question here, which is what qualification does a sales executive need? Now, needs an interesting one. Is it mandatory? No, but I guess really over to Derek, I think would be a good person to answer this question. Do you think a sales executive actually needs the qualification?
Certainly in terms of needs, there isn't a requirement to do the job to have a qualification. There isn't sort of like academic qualification for that, but certainly from our side, we won't let any sales execs talk about regulated products without being SAF expert at least. So within the first couple of weeks of them joining, of all the myriad of training that Porsche require, online training, in there is SAF expert. So that's a good amount of reading and a test which I think is 60 minutes to answer 60 questions from memory, and they're all multiple choice. And actually, you have multiple attempts as well. So that is a pure base level for me and for the group. That's an absolute minimum requirement that we have that in place before they start talking to customers.
Definitely. Fantastic.
Yeah, and can I add to that as well? You're right, John, to highlight the word need. What we do have now under the FLA lending code is a requirement that finance companies will only do business with retailers that have attained what's called SAP approved status, and that's for franchise dealerships from 2023 and for independent retailers from 2025. And so what SAP approved status means is that every customer facing person in a dealership has an up-to-date annual SAF test pass. And of course, the SAF test pass provides you with an accreditation for the first of the 3 modules under CertAutoFS. So you're already on the way to CertAutoFS. So that effectively is becoming a requirement because compliance with the FLA lending code is a requirement on all FLA lenders. And with all FLA members, and given that we've effectively got the whole of the industry in membership, that's a de facto requirement from 2023 for franchise dealerships, that you've got to be on board for SAF approved or equivalent, which means level 3. You're in the process. So yes, I mean in layman's terms, from 2023 in franchise dealerships, yes, the network has to get on board with the SAF progression. Yeah, starting with the SAF test. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Adrian. We're very, very nearly out of time. I've just got one. There's a couple of questions that have come through, which basically relate to our qualifications on LIBF. If you'd like to message me separately, I can take you through those. But yes, we do offer a taxation qualification, and also this is at level 3. This does work within our banking qualifications, funny enough, and you can actually use these as experiential learning, which will take you onto our program, which will take you up to level 6, which is first year degree level. So they do fit in with the program, and we can take you through that. If you'd like to know a little bit more information, I can help you with that. Unfortunately, I've had to dash those questions off, but basically get in touch with me directly at LIBF. You'll find me on LinkedIn, and then you can ask me a question directly there, and I'll be able to take you through a little bit more information. So anyway, I think we've pretty much filled that hour up and a couple of minutes over, and thank you all for staying with us. I appreciate that. Time's precious for everybody that's attended today. Really, really thank you for your time. So a really huge thank you to Adrian, Derek and Lee today. I think they've done a fantastic set of presentations, which will hopefully give you food for thought when it comes to professionalizing your businesses and your departments when it comes to level 3 qualifications, and obviously bringing you on to that next level. So thank you all for attending today. Obviously this will be available as a recording on our website if you want to revisit any part of it, and also I'd certainly recommend you visit the first of these webinars as well, which we did 2 months ago. So you'll have 2 webinars to listen to if you wish. So thank you very much from me at the LIBF and everybody at the LIBF, and I wish you all a very hopefully warm, I'm not sure it's that warm in the UK, but certainly a warm afternoon, and have a great week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye now.